At the Thanksgiving table, it's a tradition for them to forget me, to call me the ungrateful one. My name is Clara Hayes. I'm 33, and I work as an asset manager downtown Chicago in the heart of River North. For as long as I can remember, my parents and my sister have treated me like a ghost, their holiday plans and family photos conveniently edited to exclude me. They would gather, beaming for pictures, celebrating my sister's latest triumph while I was left to wonder, yet again, why my seat at the table was never set. They branded me selfish for wanting a life of my own, for daring to build something beyond their orbit of control. My apartment in River North, a high-rise sanctuary earned through a decade of relentless work at Summit Financial Group, is my fortress, a place where their judgment can't reach me. But this year, I decided I was done being invisible. I opened the family group chat, my fingers surprisingly steady, and typed out a single, simple message. "Don't worry, I'll make sure you all remember me." I pressed send and watched the screen ignite with their replies almost instantly. My mother's text arrived first, sharp and accusatory. What is that supposed to mean? My father's was colder, more dismissive. "Don't start drama, Clara." My sister's reply was just a single, mocking emoji, a raised eyebrow. I didn't respond. I let them wonder. I let them stew in their own assumptions. Because for the first time, I had a plan, one they could never anticipate, a strategy built on a lifetime of being pushed to the sidelines. My job had taught me how to play the long game, how to leverage assets and turn numbers into undeniable influence. This was never about proving them wrong. It was about finally, definitively, proving myself right. Their favorite label, ungrateful, used to cut me to the bone. But now it was just fuel. That message I sent was merely a spark. The real fire was on its way, and I was more than ready to let it burn. Have you ever felt like a footnote in your own family's story? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and stick with me to see how I flipped their entire world on its head. Believe me, you're not going to want to miss a single moment of what's coming. It's going to be a wild ride. I was raised in a house where the Thanksgiving table was a stage, and I was never given a part. Our family home in a quiet Chicago suburb, a sprawling place with more empty rooms than warmth, was where I first learned the bitter lesson of invisibility. My parents, Robert and Eleanor Hayes, had their universe centered entirely around my older sister, Megan. She was the star, the golden child with perfect grades, the debate team captain, the one who never set a foot wrong in their eyes. I was the afterthought, the quiet one who didn't quite fit the neat and tidy script they had written for their perfect family. By the time I was 10, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Every November, as the family gathered for Thanksgiving, I was systematically sidelined. One year, they forgot to mention what time dinner was, and I walked in just as the turkey was being carved, my arrival met with mild surprise, not apology. Another year, when I was 13, I was banished to the kids' table, squished between two young cousins who barely knew my name, while Megan, at 16, held court with the adults, basking in the glow of their praise for some school award she'd won. The ungrateful label was pinned on me early. If I dared to ask why I was being left out, my mother would let out a long, theatrical sigh. "You're just so difficult, Clara." My father would nod in solemn agreement, adding his usual refrain, "Why can't you just be more like your sister?" Megan, 3 years my senior, played her part to perfection. She'd offer me a tiny, triumphant smirk from across the room as my parents lauded her college applications or her prestigious internship at a high-powered marketing agency. I remember one excruciating evening when I received a substantial math scholarship. I showed the letter to my father, my heart pounding with a desperate hope for a crumb of acknowledgement. He barely glanced at it before turning to Megan to ask about her latest client pitch. The sting of being overlooked was never just about a seat at a table. It was a constant, gnawing reminder that in their eyes, I would never be enough. I'd retreat to my room, staring out at the distant glow of the Chicago skyline, and dream of a world where I could finally matter. The only person in that entire family who ever truly saw me was my grandmother, Helen Carter. Grandma Helen, with her razor-sharp wit and the old, leather-bound ledger books from her days as an accountant, was my secret ally. During those tense holiday gatherings, she would find a moment to pull me aside. "You're tougher than any of them think," she'd whisper, her voice low and conspiratorial, just out of my mother's earshot. She'd slip me a classic novel or a crisp $20 bill, small gestures that felt like lifelines in a sea of indifference. When I was 16, she took me out for coffee downtown, just the two of us. It was a revelation. She told me stories about her own life, about building a career in an era when women were expected to stay home. "Don't you ever let them define you, Clara," she said, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that I felt in my soul. Those words became my mantra, a shield I held up against the family's relentless dismissal. Thanksgiving after Thanksgiving, the painful tradition continued. The year I turned 18, I drove myself to the family dinner, only to walk in and find they had already started eating without me. "Oh, we thought you were busy," my mother said, her eyes focused on arranging the green beans on her plate. Megan chimed in from across the table, a saccharine smile on her face. "You've always been so independent." The word wasn't a compliment. It was a weapon meant to justify their neglect. By the time I was in my 20s, I had stopped expecting an invitation. I'd show up anyway, a fool still hoping for a scrap of recognition, but the scene was always depressingly the same. Megan's loud, performative laughter would fill the dining room as my father boasted about her latest promotion, while my mother fussed over her new condo. I was physically present, but I wasn't really there. The ungrateful tag became their go-to weapon. If I had to skip a family dinner to work late, my father would text, "Don't be so selfish with your time." If I tried to voice my feelings, Megan would roll her eyes dramatically. "Oh, here we go again." Moving into my River North apartment was my declaration of independence. The high-rise building, with its clean, modern lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, felt less like a home and more like a fortress of my own making. I had earned every square foot of it through years of grinding away at Summit Financial Group, turning abstract numbers into concrete security. It was my space, a clean slate, free from the suffocating weight of their expectations. But the hurt, the deep, foundational hurt, didn't just vanish. Every November, I'd see the posts pop up on social media, Megan, Mom, and Dad all smiling over a perfectly staged Thanksgiving table with the caption, "So much to be thankful for." Family time. I was never tagged. I was never mentioned. I wasn't there. This exclusion wasn't just about a meal. It was a clear, unambiguous message. I did not belong. Grandma Helen always understood. She would call me after those disastrous holidays, her voice a steady anchor in my emotional storm. "You're building something they can't touch, kiddo," she told me once when I was 28 and crying on the phone with her. And she was right. But the weight of being erased, of being systematically written out of my own family's history, lingered like a phantom limb. That weight shaped me. It wasn't just about being left out of parties. It was about being told, in 1,000 different ways, that I was less. Megan's successes were the yardstick against which I was constantly and unfavorably measured. When she landed a major marketing contract, my family threw a lavish celebration party. When I was promoted to a senior management position, they barely registered the news. My mother once said, in a moment of chilling honesty, "Megan is just more reliable." That single word cut deeper than 1,000 ungratefuls. It implied I was a flaw, a glitch in the matrix of their otherwise perfect family. But Grandma Helen's unwavering faith in me was my anchor. She'd tell me stories of her own battles, of how she stood up to the men in suits who underestimated her. "You will find your way, Clara," she promised me. "You always do." And I did. I found it in that pristine apartment overlooking the Chicago River, where I could finally, truly breathe. But the scars from all those Thanksgivings never fully faded. They just hardened, fueling a quiet, burning knee-deep within me to prove that I was so much more than their shadow. The email from Grandma Helen changed the entire landscape of my life. I was at my desk at Summit Financial, deep in the weeds of client portfolios and market analytics, when her name popped up in my inbox. My grandmother, Helen Carter, had officially rewritten her will. More than that, she had appointed me as the sole trustee to oversee the Carter Family Trust, a multi-million-dollar fund she had meticulously built and managed for decades. Her words on the screen were simple and direct, cutting through years of noise. "You're the one I trust, Clara. Protect it." My heart hammered against my ribs. For my entire life, I had been the invisible daughter, the family footnote, but my grandmother, the one person whose opinion I truly valued, saw my strength. This wasn't just about money. This was her legacy, her life's work, and she had chosen me to be its guardian. The very next morning, I drove to the main branch of the bank, a sleek, modern building near my River North apartment, to initiate the transfer of control. The bank officer, a polished woman named Sandra Evans, walked me through the mountain of paperwork. Her calm, professional voice was a soothing counterpoint to the storm of emotions inside me as she guided me through pages of dense legal terminology. The trust held a diversified portfolio of assets, family investments, properties, bonds, and a significant cash reserve, all of it now under my exclusive control. Signing each document felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I didn't even know was missing. My career at Summit Financial had prepared me for navigating complex financial instruments, but this was profoundly different. This was power. It was undeniable, and it was mine. Every stroke of the pen was another step out of my family's suffocating shadow, a validation of all the years I had spent quietly proving my own worth. My apartment, with its sharp angles and commanding city views, was a testament to my independence. I had clawed my way up to senior manager at a competitive firm, outsmarting market downturns and winning over skeptical, high-net-worth clients. This trust was a responsibility of a different magnitude, but I was ready for it. Grandma Helen knew I would be. Her faith in me, first planted during those long-ago coffee shop talks, echoed in my mind. I wasn't just managing an account. I was rewriting my own story. My family would not be able to ignore me any longer. I wanted to handle this fairly, professionally. I drafted a concise email to my parents and Megan, explaining that Grandma Helen had entrusted me with the management of the fund. I kept it brief and factual, promising transparency and responsible stewardship. Their response was instantaneous, flooding our family group chat with a torrent of venom. My mother wrote, "This is absolutely outrageous. You are not qualified for this." My father added, "We will get this sorted out, Clara." But it was Megan's message that stung the most, a digital slap in the face. "You've always been selfish, but this is a new low, even for you." They immediately jumped to the conclusion that I had schemed and manipulated our grandmother, as if I had somehow coerced her. I hadn't. She had chosen me precisely because she knew I would stand firm, that I wouldn't be bullied. The texts kept coming, a barrage of accusations. My father demanded an immediate family meeting, calling Grandma Helen's decision a betrayal of trust. My mother accused me of tearing the family apart. Megan, ever the pot stirrer, sent a screenshot of an old bank statement implying I had already mishandled funds. I hadn't even touched a single dime. Their words hurt, but they also brought a cold, hard clarity. They had never seen me as capable, and they never would. My job, my apartment, my entire life, I had built it all without a shred of their support. Summit Financial didn't promote me to senior manager because I was unreliable. They promoted me because I was exceptionally skilled, and Grandma Helen knew it. The hostility in the group chat didn't shake my resolve. I calmly forwarded their messages to my work email, creating a digital paper trail. Grandma Helen's words rang in my ears like a battle cry, "Don't let them define you." She had given me the tools to fight back, not just for control of the trust, but for my own self-respect. I was no longer the little girl they could sideline and ignore. The quiet strength of my high-rise apartment mirrored my own. My family thought they could intimidate me into submission, but they were about to find out just how wrong they were. I was ready for whatever they decided to throw at me next. The group chat went silent for a night, but the storm was just gathering. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was sipping coffee in my River North apartment, watching the Chicago skyline emerge from the morning haze. It was a text from my father. It was blunt, a command, not a request. "We're meeting at the house tonight. Be there." The The house meant my parents' sprawling property in a wealthy suburb about 30 minutes from downtown, a place I tried to avoid at all costs. I knew exactly what was coming. The United Front, Robert, Eleanor, and Megan, wanted the trust that Grandma Helen had placed in my care. Their angry texts had already laid the groundwork, but I still wasn't prepared for just how far they would be willing to go to get it. I drove out to the suburbs, the familiar streets tightening a knot in my chest. That house, with its perfectly trimmed hedges and flawless exterior, always felt more like a stage than a home, and tonight, it felt like a cage. Inside, the scene was set. My mother was seated at the head of the dining room table, her face a rigid mask of disapproval. My father stood by the window, his arms crossed over his chest like a sentinel. Megan was leaning forward in her chair, her eyes sharp with a predatory focus. Beside her, her husband, David, a quiet software engineer, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a man who rarely took sides, but was clearly out of his depth. The air was thick with unspoken demands. My mother spoke first, her voice dripping with condescension. "Clara, we need to have a serious discussion about the trust. It's simply not right for you to control it all by yourself." Megan immediately cut in, her words clipped and impatient. "David is starting a new tech venture. It's a huge opportunity for the family. The trust should be used to fund it." David avoided my gaze, nervously fidgeting with his watch. My father nodded. "It's only fair, Clara. We're a family. We share. The word grated on me, a bitter irony. They had never shared their approval, their praise, or even a place at their holiday table with me for years. Now, suddenly, they wanted to share millions of dollars from Grandma Helen's fund for a business venture I was just now hearing about. I kept my voice level, refusing to let them see me waver. Grandma Helen chose me to manage it. I am going to honor her wishes. The room exploded. Megan slammed her palm down on the polished wood of the table. "You're being impossibly selfish. This isn't just about you." My mother's voice rose, cracking with manufactured indignation. "After everything we've done for you, you're letting this power go straight to your head, Clara." I stood my ground. "This has nothing to do with power. It's about responsibility. Grandma trusted me, not you." David finally found his voice, speaking so softly I could barely hear him. Maybe we should hear her out." Megan shot him a look so venomous it could have curdled milk, and he immediately shrank back in his chair. I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, but it was extinguished as quickly as it had appeared. The argument escalated into a full-blown assault. Megan accused me of betraying the family, of manipulating our ailing grandmother. "You've always been sneaky, Clara," she spat, the words slicing through the air. My mother eagerly backed her up, launching into a litany of my past disappointments, every Thanksgiving I had ruined, every time I had prioritized my career over their arbitrary plans. My father began listing the family's financial needs as if they were debts I was personally obligated to repay. I didn't flinch. When they finally paused to take a breath, I delivered my final verdict. "I am not splitting the trust," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "It's non-negotiable." Megan's face turned a shade of crimson. "You will regret this, Clara." My father stepped toward me, his voice low and menacing. "You need to think about what you're doing to this family." I stood tall, meeting his gaze without blinking. "I have thought about it. I'm done being your afterthought." As I walked out of that house, I overheard Megan in the hallway, her voice hushed and urgent on her phone. "Yes, I need to verify a trust account," she was saying. My stomach plummeted. She was calling the bank, trying to get information and access behind my back. I didn't confront her. Not yet. The moment I was back in my car, I called Sandra, the bank officer. "Someone from my family is trying to get information about the trust," I said, my voice tight. Sandra's response was calm but firm. "No one has access to it, Clara. The account is locked down under your name only." I exhaled a shaky breath, but the sting of the betrayal was sharp. Megan wasn't just demanding, she was actively scheming. Back in my River North sanctuary, I sat at my desk, the meeting replaying in my head. Their desperate need to control me hadn't changed one bit since I was a child. They saw the trust as their property, not Grandma Helen's legacy. Megan's call to the bank wasn't just a petty move, it was a declaration of war. I had spent years at Summit Financial learning how to protect assets and outmaneuver risks. This was no different. Their accusations, selfish, sneaky, were just echoes of the ungrateful label they'd been pinning on me my whole life. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was the one with a trust. The one Grandma Helen believed in. I opened my laptop and emailed Sandra, formally requesting a log of any and all inquiries made about the trust. If Megan was digging, I wanted proof. My family thought they could bully me into submission, just like they had every Thanksgiving. They were about to learn a very expensive lesson. They wanted a fight. I was ready to give them one. Julia Chen's office had a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, a landscape of steel and glass that felt like an extension of her own sharp, focused energy. My new lawyer, Julia, sat across from me, her desk a bastion of organized files. After Megan's attempt to pry into the trust, I knew this was just the beginning. Julia's piercing eyes scanned the documents I had brought with me, the printouts of the group chat, my professional email to the family, and Sandra's confirmation that the trust was secure. "They're escalating," Julia said, her voice steady and confident. "Our first priority is to fortify the fund." I nodded, my resolve hardening into something like steel. Grandma Helen had charged me with protecting her legacy, and I would not let it be plundered by their greed. It didn't take long for Julia to uncover their first major play. A colleague at her firm received a tip. My parents and Megan had submitted a notarized power of attorney document to the bank, claiming I had authorized Megan to co-manage the trust. The document was a pathetic fake. My signature, which I had perfected over years of signing financial documents, was scrawled in an unfamiliar, clumsy hand. A cold dread washed over me. "They're trying to steal it," I said, the words tasting like poison. Julia's joy tightened. "This is felony fraud, Clara. We've got them." I trusted her completely. Years at Summit Financial had trained me to spot deception in spreadsheets and market trends, but this was a betrayal so personal it took my breath away. Their treachery ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. From Julia's office, I immediately called Sandra at the bank. "Lock the trust account down completely," I instructed. "No transactions, no inquiries, nothing without my direct verbal and written confirmation." Sandra acted swiftly, assuring me that no funds had been compromised. She flagged the forged document and promised to alert me to any further attempts. "I'll be sending a formal warning to the other parties involved," she added, her voice crisp with professionalism. By noon, Julia had drafted a formidable cease and desist letter addressed to Robert, Eleanor, and Megan Hayes. It was a legal broadside, demanding they stop all unauthorized actions and warning them of severe legal consequences, including criminal charges for fraud. I reviewed the letter, my hand perfectly steady as I approved it. Sending it felt like firing the first definitive shot in a war I had never wanted to start. The family's response came with predictable speed. My phone pinged with an email, not from them, but from their newly hired financial advisor, a man named Arthur Vance. Hired by my parents, Vance was a polished suit with a reputation for aggressive, role-bending tactics. His message was a thinly veiled threat disguised as professional concern. "Relinquish control of the trust to a more experienced party, or we will be forced to pursue litigation for mismanagement." He had the audacity to claim I lacked the expertise to handle the fund, citing Megan's proven business acumen in marketing. I almost laughed out loud. Megan's career was flashy, but it wasn't finance. My resume, senior asset manager at Summit Financial Group, overseeing portfolios worth hundreds of millions, spoke for itself. Julia just smirked when I showed her the email. "They're bluffing," she said. "It's a scare tactic, but we'll be prepared for it." I wasn't taking any chances. Back in my River North apartment, I worked with Sandra to implement ironclad security measures on the trust. We established a two-factor authentication system that required my explicit approval for any change, no matter how minor. I requested daily activity logs to ensure no one could bypass my authority. Julia suggested we hire a forensic accountant to audit the trust's entire history, checking for any signs of prior tampering. If they've tried anything like this before, we'll find it, she said, her confidence a grounding force. Grandma Helen's words echoed in my mind, protect it. I was doing exactly that, using every tool my career and my lawyer had given me. Arthur Vance's email was just the opening salvo. Megan sent a text dripping with venom. You're making a huge mistake, Clara. We will win this. My mother followed up with a tearful voicemail, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. Why are you doing this to us? To your own family? My father's message was curt and commanding. Talk to Arthur. Fix this. I saved every single communication, forwarding them all to Julia. Their desperation was palpable. They thought they could intimidate me, just as they always had. But I wasn't a child they could send to the kids' table anymore. My apartment, my career, my control over the trust, they were mine, earned through years of proving myself while they looked the other way. Julia laid out our strategy. If they were foolish enough to pursue litigation, we would immediately countersue for fraud, using the forged power of attorney as our primary evidence. It's an open and shut case, Clara, she said. The bank's logs, your professional record, their documented harassment, it all backs you up. A wave of pure clarity washed over me. Their accusations of mismanagement and selfishness were just a new version of the same old ungrateful song. They had always underestimated me, but I had spent a decade outsmarting volatile markets and skeptical clients. This was no different. I authorized Julia to prepare the countersuit, detailing every one of my family's deceptive and fraudulent tactics. As I left her office, I glanced at the Chicago skyline, its sharp, unyielding edges mirroring my own resolve. My family thought they could bully me into submission. They had made a grave miscalculation. Grandma Helen had chosen me for a reason. I wasn't just fighting for a trust fund. I was fighting for the right to be seen, to be respected, to exist. The legal battle was only just beginning, and I was ready to play the long game. Thanksgiving afternoon, the bank was unusually quiet. I was sipping tea in my River North apartment, enjoying the rare peace, when my phone rang. The city skyline was a sharp, beautiful silhouette against the pale November sky. It was Sandra from the bank, and her voice was urgent. Clara, your family is here. They're with Arthur Vance, she said, her tone low. They're trying to force access to the trust. My pulse spiked. Robert, Eleanor, Megan, and their hired gun, all at the bank on Thanksgiving, armed with more forged documents to try and seize Grandma Helen's legacy. I grabbed my coat, dialing Julia, my lawyer, as I ran for the door. Get to the main branch now, I said. They're making their move. I was not going to let them win. Not today. Not ever. The bank, a sleek glass tower just a short drive from my apartment, was tense. Sandra was holding them at bay at her desk. Julia arrived seconds after I did, her briefcase clicking shut with an air of finality. She didn't hesitate. Hand over the paperwork, she said to Vance, her voice cutting through the quiet. Vance, ever the smooth operator, slid a document across the desk, another power of attorney, this one supposedly signed by me, granting Megan full access to the trust. The signature was a crude, almost laughable imitation of my own. I met Sandra's eyes as she pulled up the trust's digital records and the previously flagged forgery alert on her screen. This is a forgery, she declared, her voice firm and steady. The account is under Ms. Hayes' sole control and is currently under a high-security freeze. I turned to face Megan. You really thought you could sneak this through? I asked, my voice cold with contempt. She bristled, her face flushing. You're hoarding what belongs to all of us, she snapped. My mother's voice was sharp, a familiar shrillness entering her tone. Clara, stop this nonsense right now. We are doing what's best for the family. My father added his low, rumbling threat. You're out of your depth. Let us handle this. I stood taller, feeling a surge of power that had nothing to do with the money. Grandma Helen trusted me, not you. This ends right here. Julia calmly placed our own cease and desist letter, dated weeks earlier, on the desk in front of Vance. You were all warned, she said. This is a clear and deliberate attempt at bank fraud. Vance tried to deflect, his professional smile faltering. Now, there's no need for accusations, he said smoothly. I'm sure we can resolve this quietly. But Sandra was completely unmoved. She pulled up another report on her monitor, one detailing Megan's prior phone inquiry and the first forged document they had submitted. "The bank is escalating this matter to the authorities," she said, her words hitting them like a physical blow. "We're filing a formal criminal complaint." Julia seized the moment. "And we're requesting an immediate restraining order to block any further attempts on this trust or any contact with my client," she said, handing Sandra a prepared form. Sandra nodded, already coordinating with the bank's internal legal team. A nearby teller discreetly signaled for security. My family was unceremoniously escorted out of the bank, Vance muttering about his legal options, his composure finally shattered. David, Megan's husband, lingered for a moment, giving me a brief, unreadable look before turning to follow his wife. I didn't care what it meant. The trust was safe. Their desperate gambit had failed spectacularly. As I left the bank, the weight of the moment settled over me. I had faced them down, Robert, Eleanor, Megan, and their hired advisor, and I had won, not with anger, but with evidence and resolve. Years at Summit Financial had honed my instincts for protecting what mattered, and Julia's legal precision had been the perfect weapon. Grandma Helen's trust wasn't just money, it was her belief in me made tangible. I had honored that belief. Their desperation had been their undoing, and I had simply stood my ground. My River North apartment glowed with a warmth it had never known before. The Chicago skyline sparkled like a blanket of diamonds beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. I was hosting my first real Thanksgiving dinner, a universe away from the cold, performative family gatherings I had left behind for good. My friend Amy, a brilliant graphic designer, was setting out her famous homemade cranberry sauce. Ben, a sharp-witted colleague from Summit Financial, was expertly carving the turkey, his light-hearted banter filling the room with laughter. Monica, my best friend from college, was lighting candles, her infectious smile making the whole room brighter. My downstairs neighbor, Diane, and her husband, Paul, were passing around a bowl of mashed potatoes, sharing stories about their latest city adventures. The table, once a symbol of my exclusion, now overflowed with genuine connection, filled with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. Julia, my lawyer, had called that morning with an update. The bank's investigation into Robert, Eleanor, and Megan's deceptive actions was intensifying. Their repeated attempts to access Grandma Helen's trust with forged documents had triggered a formal criminal inquiry. A local business journal had already published a short piece about a prominent suburban family entangled in a financial scandal, their names thinly veiled, but easily identifiable to anyone in their circle. Their precious social standing, once their greatest point of pride, was crumbling. Friends had stopped calling. Their church group had quietly excluded them. And David, Megan's husband, had packed a bag and left their home, unwilling to be dragged down with them. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only a quiet sense of finality. Their choices had carved this path, not mine. I had simply drawn a line in the sand. After years of their accusations, selfish, ungrateful, difficult, I finally blocked their numbers. My mother's final text was a desperate, pleading, "Clara, we're your family." I deleted it without a second thought. My father's last email, terse and commanding as always, landed directly in my trash folder. Megan sent nothing. Her silence was louder and more telling than any words she could have said. The trust, now secured with multiple layers of protection thanks to Sandra's diligence, stood untouched, a powerful testament to Grandma Helen's faith in me. My career at Summit Financial continued to thrive, my clients blissfully unaware of the personal chaos I had navigated. My apartment, with its sleek design and panoramic city views, was no longer just a sanctuary, it was my home. I had spent so long seeking approval from people who only saw me as a means to an end. Now, I surrounded myself with those who recognized my worth from the start. The lesson I learned went far beyond the survival of a trust fund. It was about taking ownership of my own life. Grandma Helen didn't just leave me money. She gave me the opportunity to prove that I could stand on my own 2 feet. My parents and Megan craved control, and they were willing to manipulate, lie, and cheat to bend me to their will. The loss of their community, their reputation, their family unity, that was the price of their greed. I, on the other hand, had gained my freedom. Not just freedom from them, but the freedom to define my own future. Choosing who shared my table, my time, and my trust, that was real power. The trust had been my grandmother's legacy, but the life I was now building was entirely my own. As we raised our glasses to toast, the city lights stretched out before us in an endless, glittering promise. I wasn't the girl they had dismissed and erased. I was Clara. I was whole. And I was, finally, more than enough. This was my home. This was my family. This was my victory.